Good morning, early risers, and welcome back to the Saturday morning edition of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show, sponsored by Prize Picks. I am your host, Josh Harris. Good morning. Joining me, as always, the French toast addict, Slim Cliffy. How you doing?
Good, man. Yeah, we were talking before the show. I've just been making French toast every morning this week for breakfast. Diet's not going so well. Doing well.
As I crack open poison.
Yeah. Probably not a whole lot of time for banter at the top of the show today. We have 13 games on the slate tonight, which, like, I feel like it wasn't even a few weeks ago we had a 5-game slate on a Saturday night. Like, I wish they could just make these a little bit more consistent, but nothing wrong with lots of options, lots of good spots here tonight as well. Obviously, some pretty big news that we're going to have to wait for that we don't have here right at the top of the show. We are doing it at 9 a.m. Eastern. Obviously, there's been no morning skates or anything. Just looking at the first game alone, what the Boston lineup is going to be, because they did move David Pastrnak up to the top line, and they had a rotating cast of characters on the second line in Boston's last game. And then obviously with Toronto, Austin Matthews looks like he's going to play, but we don't have confirmation of that either. That's very important news. Just one game out of the 13. So, make sure you pay attention to Twitter. If you're a Stokastic member, definitely pay attention to the Discord today. There's probably going to be some pretty important lineup information. Couple of teams on back-to-backs as well. So always lots of stuff to watch out for, but pretty excited to dig into this one.
Yeah, if you're watching this later in the afternoon, as I talk, it is 9:01 a.m. Eastern time. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to say about Matthews, about this and that, could be old news by the time you watch this. We're just giving our best guesses at this point. But yeah, 13-game slate. We don't have overtime like we had during the week, so no time for my silly shenanigans. So we should get into the slate. But before we do, make sure to smash that like button. Also, you should subscribe. Like, if you're hitting the like, it's one more click to subscribe. And you know what that does? You keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. You also can hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Don't forget, all of our content is available in podcast form on the platform of your choice, except for Live Before Locks, which I am back on today for an MMA Live Before Lock, 1 p.m. Eastern. Shameless plug there. Help us out by leaving a 5-star review. Once again, shout out to Prize Picks. We will have a offer for you later. Let's get into this slate. Toronto. Oh, wow. As I switch to the lineup builder, I see our esteemed boss, Jake Hari, has awakened from his slumber and loaded in projections and totals. Thank you, Jacob. Toronto Maple Leafs with a 2.7 total heading into Boston. The Bruins have a 3.3 total. Matt Murray, Swayman, probable. I'm just going off what the lineup builder has. Obviously, once, if these teams skate and it updates, you'll see that. As Cliff, you mentioned, Pasternak moved up to the top line, Marchand and Bergeron. A whole revolving door of people were on the second line, so maybe they skate this morning. Maybe we'll get some definitive news. Boston's usually good with that kind of stuff, so hopefully we'll know in the next few hours here. Again, we're waiting on Matthews. I would assume he's going to skate this morning, and then Sheldon Keefe's going to be like, yeah, he might play. So, we really don't know. So, this game is kind of hard to break down, but if Matthews is out, even if Matthews is in, I do like the Bruins top line, but if Matthews is out, I am more interested in Boston one.
Yeah, these games are always pretty fun, Toronto-Boston games, whether in the regular season or the playoffs. There have been some pretty interesting games between these two teams going back pretty much a decade now. Matthews being back would obviously change a lot about the Toronto top line. One thing that they had been doing pretty well of late was playing well defensively. I was looking at their numbers since Christmas. Now, obviously, we're just talking a few weeks sample here, but 2.1 expected goals against since Christmas. That is excellent defensive play from the top line. So Matthews being there will change a lot. If Matthews is back, we know Michael Bunting probably will be off the top power play unit, right? Because Morgan Riley is back running as a power play quarterback. So it takes a little bit of, I don't want to say upside, a little bit of a fantasy profile hit to Michael Bunting. So Toronto's top line, I mean, they are close to matchup proof, but by the same token, if it's Allmark in net and you're going into Bergeron and Marchand with Charlie McAvoy on the blue line, I just really don't have it. Not on a 13-game slate. If this was a 5-gamer or 4-gamer or something like that, that might change my opinion. But single entry 3 max on a slate this big, I don't think you have to go to either of the Toronto top 2 lines. I know, I know Marner, Tavares, and Yarncroc have been scoring a little bit. They're also shooting nearly 18% since Christmas. Just not generating a ton of offense. They're really relying on those percentages, and those percentages can't last. Marner's down to 23 shots in his last 10 games. So I'm probably not in on Toronto. On the Boston side, if Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak are a 3-man line, that obviously would be something I'm interested in. But by the same token, you'd be looking at a line that's, I think, $24K. That's pretty expensive against a Toronto team that is still pretty good defensively. It's just their goaltending has been a little wonky of late. So if that Boston top line is completely united, I do have a little bit of interest in them. I just find them a little bit too expensive on a slate this large, to justify spending nearly half my cap space on them on DraftKings. So I'm going to be honest. I don't think I'm going to stack anything out of this game personally. Of anything, it would be that Boston top line, Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak. But I don't think that this is a matchup where I'm going to run out and just 3-man stack and even strength line, especially considering the prices and, considering Toronto's matchup on the road.
Yeah. 24K is a steep price with a lot of other big guns on this slate. They'll probably get low ownership if that is the case. And if Matthews is out, in MME, I think you can set aside some lineups for some Boston here. But yeah, 1 to 3, it's always tough to fit these massively expensive lines without really hurting yourself in another position. So yeah, I think that's an MME type deal. Let's move on to the next one. Columbus Blue Jackets with a 2.6 total heading into Detroit. The Red Wings have a 3.8 total. That's a big one. Merzlikins is probable, who's still min price on DraftKings. Ville Husso, 8,300 confirmed for the Red Wings. Red Wings going with Bertuzzi, Larkin, Raymond as the top line. I wish Raymond was getting top power play time. That line, if Perron was on that line, I would be like, this is a full send. But Columbus, doesn't take a ton of penalties.
Should mention to you, Raymond did get moved to the top power play unit of practice yesterday. So that Detroit top line is perfectly correlated.
So that's what happens when Joshy Poo takes a day off from NHL. He misses the news. But, with Raymond moving to that top power play, that does – listen, that line is 13,400 on DraftKings. Fully correlated going against the Blue Jackets. They're going to be chalky. On the flip side, I think this is a good spot to go back to Roslovic, Gaudreau, Laine. Boone Jenner has started skating, so we'll have to see an update. I don't think he'll be back after one skate, but it's worth noting that he could be back. That top line is also fully correlated. Johnny Gaudreau's price has dropped down to 5,900, line is 6,300. So, the Wings have a massive total, but it's also the Wings. So, I don't mind getting some Blue Jackets here.
Yeah, for me, it would depend entirely on Jenner's health. If Jenner is in and we get a top line of Gaudreau, Jenner, Laine, or something like that, then yes, I definitely would have interest. But as we mentioned on the last show, Gaudreau's production and his shot rate considerably lower without Jenner. Now, I know Gaudreau scored in the last game. Good for them.
On 7 shots.
Yeah, they still lost 6-2 or whatever it was. But Jenner does make a big difference, not only at 5-on-5, but on the power play as well. Columbus's top power play unit generates 16% more shot attempts with Jenner on the ice than without him. So he's pretty important, not just at even strength, but on the power play for that top line. So if Jenner is back, there would be a little bit of interest from me on that top line. Not overly expensive, as you mentioned, with Laine and Gaudreau. Their price is kind of taking a bit of a dip. If Jenner, Gaudreau, and Laine is a line, that's under 18K on DraftKings. That's pretty good. I don't think ownership is going to be that high on them because I don't think the total would even come up that much if Jenner is in. So if Jenner's in, I do have a little bit of interest in that Columbus top line. You're right on Detroit. Jake actually ran top stacks just after we got on the air. I'm looking at Larkin, Bertuzzi, and Raymond. 21.4% ownership on DraftKings tonight, leading the slate in expected ownership because of the price, because of the perfect correlation, because of the matchup. For that reason, I'm probably out on that Detroit line. If you want to play him, it's a good spot, perfectly correlated. Don't mind it at all. They've looked decently good in a pretty small sample so far this year. 3.2 expected goals for in about 50 minutes together. Just not a huge sample so far this year. Bertuzzi has had some wonky minutes. Like you said, Columbus not awful on the penalty kill. Don't take a ton of penalties. So if you want to use Detroit, go ahead. I just think they're going to come in way higher owned than I want to. It feels like Detroit is in the Columbus spot that Columbus was in 2 months ago when the Blue Jackets were 17K or whatever, and they would always be 19% on every 9-game slate. So out on that Detroit top line. A little bit of more of interest to me would be that Detroit second line, Kubalik, Perron, Rasmussen. Kubalik looks like he's going to be the fourth forward on the top power play unit, so he's getting a little bit of extra juice involved. Perron, Rasmussen, getting rid of Andrew Kopp is probably going to help that line's numbers quite a bit. If Jenner's back, that Detroit second line will be going into the depth, and then you're getting into your Kent Johnson, your Jack Roslovics. There's just not much for defense there. So I don't mind Detroit too as kind of a cheaper pivot. I think you can just one off some guys, but I think I'd avoid the Detroit top line. There's just too much ownership.
Yeah, Kubalik when he gets the minutes is good for DFS. I don't listen, I'm not a coach. I don't understand why he keeps getting moved down the lineup on every team. Maybe he is a giant pain in the ass. Maybe he's an egotistical maniac. Maybe he lacks defensive responsibilities. I don't know. But if he's on the second line, top power play unit, I want him in my lineup. Let's move on to the next one. Vancouver Canucks with a 2.9 total heading into Florida. The Panthers have a 4 total. Spencer Martin, Sergei Bobrovsky are probable. Canucks are just over machines. This game's going to be an absolute festival, I feel like. And the line that I want to go to is Tkachuk, Bennett, Verhaeghe. If you want a power play stack, the Panthers here, I think that's fine. Go Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart. But if I'm going to 5-on-5 stack, it's going to be that Bennett Tkachuk line. On the Canucks side, it's the Pettersson Kuzmenko line. Like, I guess you could go to Garland, Horvat, Miller. You probably could. I just prefer having Elias Pettersson in my lineup.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting game here because there's probably going to be a lot of ownership on Florida. The top stacks has the Barkov line. It's the second highest owned line on the slate behind that Detroit top line we just talked about. And an interesting thing is, like, Anton Lundell is not having a very good season. I write about season-long fantasy hockey at a different site, and I was looking at some of his numbers for a guide that we're writing here shortly. Like, there's just been not a lot of improvement from him from last year. And him and Sam Reinhart, the offensive numbers together haven't been great. Like, Reinhart and Lundell have around 200 minutes together this year, 5-on-5, 2.4 expected goals for, which is below league average, 2.7 actual goals. Like, it's fine, but it's nothing special, right? Barkov will certainly help in this regard, but it's not like I don't expect him to suddenly turn into like a Toronto 1 or a Dallas 1 or something like that, right? Meanwhile, that Florida second line that you mentioned, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, and Bennett, only coming in with 3% ownership. I got to think part of it is that Tkachuk is the only player on that line on the top power play unit. Vancouver has an awful penalty kill. Something that we should note, as bad as Vancouver's penalty kill is, they have started taking a lot fewer penalties. Since December 1st, the second fewest time spent shorthanded per game, only about 4 minutes. Doesn't really give the Panthers a ton of power play time to work with. They could still get there against this penalty kill, but I don't think just defaulting to Barkov and Reinhart because there's 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play unit. I don't think that's necessarily the approach that you have to take. And that Florida second line of Bennett, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk have played a reasonable amount together this year because of all the injuries. 120 minutes together, 4.3 expected goals for, 3.6 actual goals for. Verhaeghe's on like a 35 or a 40 goal pace. Obviously, Tkachuk could be in the Hart Trophy conversation if Florida can climb back into the playoff race. Like, it's just an excellent line. They're probably I'm guessing they're going to get the Bo Horvat matchup, which, I would kind of want to rather to see them go into Kuzmenko and Besser, but any matchup against JT Miller, I don't think is a terrible matchup defensively. So I'm with you. I really like Florida too in this matchup. If you do want to take off Bennett and put in Barkov, make it a power play stack, I have no problem with that. But I think Florida too, just the way they're playing and the really low ownership coming in on them, I think is the play here. On the Vancouver side, Florida does take a lot of penalties. They're at 3.7 times shorthanded per game. Only Arizona is taking more penalties on the season. They're top 5 by time shorthanded over the last 6 weeks, so it's not anything that's getting that much better. The penalty kill itself has been bad, mainly because of goaltending, but that's been Florida's calling card for a while now. And the Vancouver top power play is pretty good, and you're going to get 2 out of the 3 guys on that Pettersson, Kuzmenko, Besser line. Not expensive, not a terrible matchup against Florida, I don't think. So I'm with you. I don't mind the Pettersson line here if you want to go with a pretty low-owned mid-price line, but I think it's Florida too I like the best in this game.
Yeah, that note you had about the Vancouver penalty kill, not taking as much penalties, that makes me want to play Florida too more because, Vancouver doesn't take a lot of penalties, but they're also a mess 5-on-5 defensively. So, and if Sam Bennett's going to have line mates, he's going to shoot the puck more. That's the Sam Bennett you want in your lineup. So I always, every time we're on a slate, it always feels like Florida 2. For 3 years, we're just pumping Florida 2. We should be sponsored by Florida 2. But this is I'm going to default to that line.
Yeah. Here's just to back up your point. I was looking since December 1st because I was looking at some PK numbers at 5-on-5. The only teams giving up more expected goals against over Vancouver's last 6.5 weeks are Anaheim and Montreal at 5-on-5. And the only team giving up more goals against per minute is Anaheim. So, sub out Vancouver Canucks, insert Anaheim Ducks. And what would your opinion be of this matchup, right? That's kind of the way you can look at it.
Yeah. Vancouver is the Ducks without John Gibson. So,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. 4-2. Let's get to your Canadiens. Oh God, this matchup makes me want to. We'll just stop there. Montreal Canadiens with a 2.4 total heading into the New York Islanders. That blows. The Islanders have a 3.5 total. Like, going into Long Island is just a miserable experience. It's just awful. Samuel Montembeault, Semyon Varlamov, probable. That's what's in the lineup builder. Could be, Sorokin. I like Barzal Lee. I think that's where I want to be if I'm going to use the Islanders. But then this coach is quite a scene for DFS. We'll just say, like, but you get two guys on the top power play there. Barzal is by far their best offensive player. Anders Lee, despite having no ligaments left in his knees, is probably the second best offensive player. You mentioned on the last show how Nelson's numbers without Lee are just absolutely atrocious. So Barzal Lee for me. On the Montreal side, like, if it is Varlamov, I have interest in the Canadiens' top line. I don't think you have to full stack. I think one-off in Cole Caulfield on any slate is fine. You want to pair him with Kirby Dack, it's fine. Like I don't want to just like bash Nick Suzuki all the time, but like he's literally a more expensive Lundberg at this point.
Yeah.
So I think Caulfield is the guy if you want to pair him with Kirby Dack. Just because he's $1,300 cheaper than Suzuki is fine for me.
Yeah, I starting in net, I think there's a reasonable chance we do see Varlamov. Sorokin has started 10 out of their last 11 games. Here they get a basement team to play against, and their next 5 games are Washington, Boston, Buffalo, Carolina, Toronto. It would seem like this would be a good time to give Sorokin a little bit of rest before a pretty brutal matchup coming up in the next 10 days to 12 days, whatever it is. So
makes sense.
Yeah. But Varlamov's played well. He's certainly not been, to Sorokin's level, but he still played well this year. I'm with you. I don't think you have to leave Suzuki. Like, Caulfield really does make a good one-off. I tweeted this the other day. Since it's been 80 games since Martin St. Louis has been hired, and Cole Caulfield has 49 goals in those 80 games.
Little boy goals.
Yeah, he's basically been a 50 goal scorer per 82 games under Martin St. Louis. So, Caulfield certainly makes a fine one-off. Doc, I think, even makes a decent one-off. It's not a very good power play spot. The Islanders don't take a ton of penalties. The Islanders also, one thing I should note is their penalty kill gives up more from the slot than it does from the tops of the circles. And the tops of the circles are where Suzuki and Caulfield play from, whereas the slot is more Kirby Doc's area. So I do think one-offing him makes a little bit of sense here. On the Islanders side, like, Barzal playing with Simon Holmstrom is just so frustrating. 70 minutes together this year, 1.6 expected goals for, playing at a very slow Corsi for and against pace. Like, yeah, it's the Montreal Canadiens, but a lot of teams will have a 3.8 or a 3.9 or even a 4 total in this spot. I think there's a pretty good reason why the Islanders are sitting at 3.5. Liam Barzal, I guess, are fine to play. I just wish they had almost anybody there but Holmstrom. Hope, maybe even Kyle Palmieri can return. That'd be nice to see. But anyways,
I think Zach Parisi there would be good.
Yeah, like something. I honestly, at this point, I would take Casey Cizikas. Like, I swear to God. The Islanders' second line has been awful this season. Bailey, Nelson, Beauvillier, 2.2 expected goals for, 3.9 expected goals against. You're talking about Nelson's numbers without Lee. So, like, if you want a one-off, Christian Dvorak, because he's on the top power play unit, he's fairly cheap. Josh Anderson always makes a decent one-off, something like that. I think that's fine. But I'm going to be honest, maybe Nelson, maybe Barzal and Lee, because they do get power play time together, probably should stay together 5-on-5. But other than that, not a lot of interest in this game. Yeah,
me either. So let's move on to the next one. The Philadelphia Flyers with a 2.5 total heading into the nation's capital. The Capitals have a 3.5 total, I should say, America or United States capital. There are some Canadians on the show. Carter Hart, Charlie Lindgren, probable here. Sonny Milano let me down the other night. It's okay, Sonny. I forgive you. It's nice to see you get top line minutes. I hope he sticks there. This is a pretty good matchup for the Capitals. I think you can full stack that top line. You want to leave Sonny Milano off, add in a TJ Oshie, that's fine. You want to add in Backstrom, that's fine. This is a pretty good power play spot. Backstrom and Oshie connected for a goal late in the third period in their last game. I didn't watch it, but I don't think Backstrom got a ton of minutes in that game. But he still is only 3,800. I think power play stacking is the way to go. On the Flyer side, this is a tough-ish matchup, but if anything, like I'm one-offing Travis Konechny. That dude is just going bonkers this season. And it's like the numbers back it up. It's not like it's a fluke. It's there. But if I'm going to go to a line for this game, it's going to be Frost, Van Riemsdyk, Tippett.
Yeah, I'm not sure how great of a power play spot it is for Washington. Like, the power play itself hasn't been that good this year. I know I think it's a fair question to ask how useful or close to 100%. Let's say Backstrom is at this point. And since December 1st, the Philadelphia Flyers have the fewest shots against per minute while on the penalty kill, under 40. Which is like, I think that's like Anaheim's 5-on-5 shots against in that span, and not allowing a ton of goals, 6.65. I think that's tied with New Jersey for 10th fewest. Like, I don't know if it's that great of a power play spot for Washington. I think it's a pretty good 5-on-5 spot for the top line. It depends but it depends how they match lines, because they do have Backstrom, Oshie, and Eller all skating together. That kind of screams checking line to me. But whether they want to use them as a checking line, I don't know. We don't know how they're going to send these players out, especially I think Nick Dowd is on the third line with Tom Wilson. I think that's the way they lined up yesterday at practice. So even Dowd's not on the fourth line, where he might be used as shutdown player sometimes. So Backstrom, Oshie, and Eller go out against Konechny, Cates, and Farabee. That leaves Ovechkin and Kuznetsov going out likely against the JVR Tippett Frost line. And JVR Tippett Frost haven't been that bad defensively. 70 minutes since Christmas, 2.5 expected goals against, now 6.1 actual goals against, because the goaltending has let them down at times, certainly.
That's miserable. Holy.
But Ovechkin and Kuznetsov play pretty well offensively together, have for a few years now. They're at 4.4 goals scored per 60 minutes this year. Even if it's not a good power play spot, I don't mind Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, throw in Sonny Milano, certainly, if you want. Not coming in with a ton of ownership, having that 5% on top two stacks. I think they're certainly playable. They would be in consideration for me. I don't know if they would be a priority. On the Philadelphia side, not showing a ton of ownership on any of the Flyers lines. I think that's probably right for 2.5 total with 3 lines that can score. It's not a very good power play spot, for the Flyers. Washington, 2.9 times shorthanded per game. That's well below league average. The Washington goaltending has certainly held up on the penalty kill of late. I don't know. I don't think there's anything that I really love by full stacking. I think it's, if anything in this game for me, it is the Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Milano line. In 1 to 3, I don't know if this is where I'm going to be going for my stacks, though.
Yeah, there are a lot of options on this slate, and it's kind of, one off Ovechkin, if he's not super high owned, is always in play, but lots of options. As we mentioned off the top, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. Make sure to click the link in the description below to get 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit with Prize Picks. Now, that link in the description is for me and Cliffy. It is specific for Cliffy and I. So if you like affiliate marketing and you like Cliffy and I, click that link. We get credit if you sign up. You get $100 deposit match bonus and 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum. And if you sign up with that link, makes all the bosses happy. They're like, oh, wow, you're good at ad reads. And you're getting people to sign up, which means more free shows for you. And also, you don't have to worry about playing against Sharks on Prize Picks. It's just a daily prop-based contest. 5-player lineups can net you up to 10x your entry fees. You can cross sports here with MMA, football, NBA today, as well as NHL, you can load in one from each sport if you want. Remember, click the link in the description below. Get 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum and a $100 deposit match bonus. Let's move on to the next game here. Pittsburgh Penguins with a 2.6 total heading into Carolina. The Hurricanes have a 3.5 total. Pittsburgh played last night. They looked awful against the back-to-back on the road Jets. Casey DeSmith, Pyotr Kuchetkov, probable. Not much ownership in this game. It looks like we have to wait and see on Pacioretty. He got hurt and left. Didn't come back in their last game. This game is kind of like, with Pacioretty's status up in the air, kind of screams MME here, depending on the lines. If Stasny, Netchus, Svechnikov are together, I don't mind that line.
Yeah, we'll have to see how Carolina decides to line up. You know, when Pacioretty got hurt, they just moved Teuvo Teravainen to the top line and left him there basically the entire game. It was a blowout against Columbus, so, you know, they sat guys towards the end of the game. Not a big deal. Teravainen on that line with Jarvis and Aho, pretty good numbers together. 3.6 expected goals for, 2.1 expected goals against in 170 minutes together this year. We talked about it often, how much better Jarvis has been over the last, 2 seasons, the only 2 seasons he's been in the league, with Sebastian Aho on his wing. He's not having as good of a season this year as you'd want to see, but he's had better defensive impacts, which, you know, in a way can help offense. Certainly if you're limiting the team's opposition's chances, you help your own team generate more. Should also note when Pacioretty got injured that they moved Teravainen to, you know, quote, the top power play unit, the one with Brett Pesce. So this line is perfectly correlated on the power play. Pittsburgh's penalty kill has generally been pretty good this year. The goaltending, especially of late, has been really good. I'm not a big fan of Casey DeSmith. I don't know if he's that good of a goalie. Not that it makes a huge difference in net, but I don't think it's like a massive upgrade over Dustin Tokarski or anything like that. So I kind of like that Aho, Jarvis, Pacioretty. Here's why, is because when New Jersey was in town earlier this week, I think they put out the stall line against the Hischier line, which I think you'd expect, but then they used Aho and Jarvis against the Jack Hughes line. That would tell me they go up against Zucker, Raquel, and Malkin from the Penguins. That line got absolutely ran over last night by Winnipeg's bottom 6. Like, not really a good showing by that Pittsburgh second line, and they have been struggling defensively before that. Like, their prior 50 minutes together before that, 2.9 expected goals against, a fair bit worse than league average, 4.8 actual goals against. I think it's a pretty good matchup for Aho and Jarvis with Teravainen on that line. Again, perfectly correlated. Now, we still have them with Pacioretty there in our top stacks, not coming in with a ton of ownership. But, you know, Teravainen is $3,500 cheaper than Pacioretty. All of a sudden, that line is $14,200, I think. Makes for a pretty cheap stack. I wonder if they're not a popular filler if that ownership doesn't come up. But it's Pacioretty, Aho, and Jarvis. Teravainen, Aho, and Jarvis that I do like best. Nothing for me on the Penguins side. Back-to-back on the road. Top line going into Jordan Staal. Carolina with really good penalty kill. Pittsburgh down possibly their top 3 defensemen. I'm out on the Penguins.
Yeah, same. No interest in the Penguins here. We'll have to wait and see on Carolina lines. Let's move on to the next one. Out of this, Ottawa Senators with a 2.9 total heading into Colorado. The Avalanche have a 3.6 total. Cam Talbot, Alexander Georgiev probable. Looks like the lines are status quo here. Yeah, Avalanche are coming off a loss to the Blackhawks. They had a team meeting. Look into that, whatever you will. Surprise, surprise. I like the Avs top line here. I think if you want to make it more power play-ish, you can add in Rantanen, but he's pretty expensive as it is. That top line, for as good as they are offensively, have been mediocre, I would say, defensively. So I think, you know, some Ottawa power play stuff or the top line, if they go back to like DeBrincat, Kachuk, Stützle. I like that line a lot as well. So yeah, both top lines in play for me.
Yeah, mediocre defensively might have been a little bit generous on the Colorado side. Evan Rodriguez and Nathan McKinnon are up to 85 minutes together. Really good offensively, like excellent offensively. 4.2 expected goals for, 5 actual goals, generating nearly 80 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Like those are just like awesome offensive numbers. But defensively, like considerably worse than league average. 3.3 expected goals against. I think the league average is at about 2.6, maybe a little bit less at this point. 3.5 expected goals against. Now they are all in the top power play unit. Ottawa penalty kill. Ottawa does take a fair amount of penalties, 3.5 times shorthanded per game. I think the league average is around 3.2 right now. And the Ottawa penalty kill has been saved by their goaltending. Their goaltending, 947 on the penalty kill since December 1st.
That's just bonkers.
Like we've been seeing over the last month with the San Jose Sharks and their goalie regression, what happens to a penalty kill when it's running really hot by save percentage, and then all of a sudden that crashes. That's a big concern for Ottawa. Eventually, that's just going to crash big time. And it's like Colorado doesn't seem like a bad matchup for that to happen. The Colorado top line by Top Stacks tool is probably going to come in fairly high owned. We have them at around 16% right now. But still with positive leverage because they do play so many minutes, because it's not really a bad spot on the power play for them. Not a terrible spot at 5-on-5, though Ottawa is not awful defensively at even strength. I certainly don't mind the Colorado top line here. You can play them, you can take out Lehkonen, you can put in Rantanen, you can just make it like a full 4-man power play unit stack or whatever. Stack it however you want. I don't think it's a bad matchup. The Ottawa top line doesn't have a sample there really with Alex DeBrincat, because him and Stützle haven't really played that much together this year. They did look good in their last game. Obviously, that was against Arizona. But it was nice to see DeBrincat bust out of his slump. He had a goal and assist with 5 shots. He hadn't scored, I think, in 5 straight games or something. Hadn't been shooting a lot. But he played over 20 minutes, 5 shots on goal. It's nice to see him break out. I really do like that Ottawa top line. They're not going to come in with very much ownership here, being on the road and a 2.9 total. Colorado doesn't have a very good penalty kill, and that is the one area that Ottawa has certainly succeeded this year. That's where they draw a lot of their fantasy value. Colorado, middle of the road by shots against on the PK in their last 20 games, near the bottom 5 by goals against, like right in that Seattle range. I do like the Ottawa top line here, but I think in this matchup with Colorado's top line being perfectly correlated, I do like them as well. It's both top lines for me. It's just a matter of, do you want to play one that's probably going to be pretty chalky or one that's going to have very little ownership? And I think that might depend on how many lineups you're playing tonight.
Yeah, this game's going to be a festival. We love festivals.
Love festivals.
Love festivals. Oh, no. I'm looking at the next game. Seattle Kraken with a 3.6 total. Heading into Chicago, the Blackhawks have a 2.4 total. We'll have to wait and see on Patty Kane news. Not that makes a massive difference here.
He's probably going to be in. He was at practice yesterday. The beat writers seem to think that he'll be in.
Martin Jones have back-to-back shutouts or like back-to-back good games?
Back-to-back shutout. Was it? No. 1 goal against.
1 goal against in each.
Yeah. One was a shutout. He shut out Boston. Yeah, back-to-back shutouts. Montreal and Boston. Sorry. I was thinking of the Toronto game where he allowed 1 goal against.
Looks like I have multiple shows to wear. Whatchamacallit? What are those big hats called?
Like a 10-gallon hat?
Sombrero.
Okay.
Anyway, like Seattle's got a massive total. It feels like they've been on the road since American Thanksgiving.
I think this is 8-9 in a row for them.
Yeah. Just a lot of road games here.
Yeah, 7th in a row on the road.
This is a good power play spot. The problem is, like, if you play one unit, the other one's going to go off. You know what I mean? So, like, you want to stack that Beniers, Burakovsky, Everlay line. I think that's fine. Like, they have a 3.6 total. They're coming in under 3%. So, I like them. You want to go back to Gord, Bjorkstrand, and Tolvanen. I think that's fine. They're actually getting more ownership than that top line. So, I'd probably just go to that top line at that point. On the Hawks side, probably nothing.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the Seattle second and third lines, I mean the Wenberg line and the Gord line, like they're basically identical in price, and we have them based pretty close to similar in top 2 stack percentage. But the Gord line coming in like way higher owned, like more than double the ownership. So I think if you're going to play the Seattle second or third lines, I would just go to McCann, Schwartz, and Wenberg. Like I don't see a big difference between those lines. The numbers, our projections certainly don't, and the ownership would just dictate go to Schwartz and Wenberg. But it is the Seattle top line I do like the best here. Beniers, Burakovsky, Everly. Not tremendous numbers, 2.4 expected goals for, shooting over 18%. Like that's going to regress, and you need them to see them generate more offense. It's just such a good matchup going into Chicago. The Chicago penalty kill is really, really bad. That Seattle line is perfectly correlated on the power play together. They've started flattening out the minutes in Seattle, which is a worry because that third line has been playing better. So, even though Everly, Burakovsky, and Beniers are the top line, every player on that line might play like around 17 minutes, which is a bit of a concern, but perfectly correlated on the power play. Like you said, not much ownership. Tremendous matchup going up against Chicago. Tremendous power play matchup, even strength, everything. I do like that Seattle top line. I agree with you. On the Chicago side, if anything, it's just focusing on the power play guys. Radish, Taves, Domi, and now obviously Patrick Kane. Like if there's one thing Chicago has, it's a decent penalty kill. I think their top power play unit's around 10 goals per 60 minutes so far this year, which is good, like actually good, not just Chicago adjusted good. And the Seattle penalty kill is really, really bad. Now, Seattle doesn't give up a ton of power plays. Chicago doesn't draw a ton of power plays, but they don't need a lot if Martin Jones isn't on his game. So even if I don't think I'd full stack Chicago, but I do think like a one-off Taylor Radish would certainly make some sense. Patrick Kane is always acceptable as a one-off, especially with how often he's generally been shooting over the last couple months. Kane one off, Radish one off. I think those are fine, but I'm not full stacking the Blackhawks.
Yeah. We'll leave the full stacking on the Blackhawks to our boss, Jake. So yeah. Good luck, Jake. Tampa Bay Lightning with a 3.4 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 2.6 total. Brian Elliott, Jordan Binnington are probable. Stamkos is going for goal 500 or 6. It's 500, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just answered my own question in my head there. Not a lot of ownership on Tampa here. I guess, 3.4 total on the road isn't high enough on this slate for ownership, but I think going back to that Tampa Kucherov Point Hagel line is perfectly fine here. You want to one-off Stamkos because they're going to probably force feed him to try to get that goal is fine. You want to go to the Buchnevich, Thomas, Kyrou line on the Blues. I think that is also fine, especially if Elliott's in net, although he hasn't had a bad season. That being said, Blues probably more MME. I think, the Tampa top line would be in consideration for 1 to 3, but I don't know if it'd make the cut.
So we have to watch Tampa lines here because I'm pretty sure in their last game, after like the third or fourth shift of the game, they just moved Stamkos alongside Point and Kucherov and left them there for the entire game. That line has tremendous offensive numbers going back a few years now. Obviously, they would be perfectly correlated on the power play together, which, St. Louis doesn't take a ton of penalties, so it's not like it's like a huge bonus, but certainly when you get perfect correlation on the power play, it's a bonus nonetheless. But at 5-on-5 over the last few years together, that top line, 4.3 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 5.4 actual goals if Stamkos is with Point and Kucherov. So we'll have to see what lines are at morning skate, if they have a morning skate. If Hagel's there instead of Stamkos, you're right. I'm perfectly fine playing that Point Kucherov Hagel line. Going up against that St. Louis top line, they're at 2.5 expected goals against without Ryan O'Reilly. That's including 2 games against Calgary, 1 against Montreal, I think. Like, just not like a lot of top competition, certainly not a Tampa 1 or anything like that. So I think it's a good matchup for the Tampa top line. We just have to see if Stamkos is in. On the St. Louis side, like I know Thomas, Buchnevich, Akaru have certainly had good games, but they haven't been generating that much. Like I said, it hasn't really been a super tough schedule of late without Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko in the lineup. You know, their last 5 games: New Jersey, Montreal, Minnesota, Calgary twice. Like, it's not really a murderer's row there. Only 1.7 expected goals for in their 65 minutes together. It's just not generating a ton. Like, if you want to play them, like, I think it's fine because they're not coming in with much ownership. But I also think there are some other lines in that 17K ish range that I would probably rather play. You know, that Carolina line, though, you know, they're quite a bit cheaper now with Teravainen in there. You know, certainly I think the Ottawa second line would be a decent spot. You know, the Florida second line is a little bit more expensive, but I think would be more in play for me. So probably nothing for me from the St. Louis side. You know, Brandon Saad, I think something like that is a one-off, I think, is in play. You know, if you want to go all the way to Braden Shen, you know, you can do it, but it's not something I'm super interested in. For me, it's about the Tampa top line. It's just about whether Hagel or Stamkos is there. I probably have quite a bit of interest if Stamkos is there, especially.
Yeah. He's only $1,100 more than Hagel, too. So it's not like it's a $3,000 jump, you know what I mean? Yeah. So you can definitely make it work. Let's move on to the next one. Buffalo Sabres with a 3 total heading into Nashville. The Predators have a 3.5 total. Eric Comrie, UC Saros probable. I was a bit surprised how low the Sabres total was, but then I realized that after the top line, it's just nothing. So, like, it's pretty heavily correlated on that top line scoring, and I think this is a good matchup. It's a good power play matchup. They're fully correlated. They're not getting much ownership. They have a very high projection. It's not as high as Colorado one, but it's close. They are more expensive than Colorado one, but Buffalo one being a contrarian option on this slate in one of the better power play matchups on the slate, I'm interested. If Forsberg and Duchesne are still together, we don't know. They might be, but if they are, that line does interest me as well.
Yeah, so a couple games ago, Nashville starts the game with Duchesne and Forsberg on different lines, puts them together by the middle of the second period, leaves them together for the rest of the game. They go into the next game with Duchesne and Forsberg on different lines, and then, hey, guess what happens? As they get through the game, that was the one in Montreal, by the way. As they get to about the middle of the second period, they put Duchesne and Forsberg back together. Like, just leave them together, please. We'll see what the Nashville lineup looks like. Yes, certainly if Duchesne and Forsberg are together, I do have interest. They're up to 85 minutes together this year without Granlund on their line. And in those 85 minutes, 4.5 expected goals for, 2.3 against. Like, Duchesne and Forsberg are just really, really good offensive players, and they play very, very well together. And they've been playing well together this year as long as Michael Granlund's been anywhere else but as the center. So if he's not there and Duchesne and Forsberg are together, I do have some interest in that particular combination. If they're not, it's probably just going to, you know, that Glass, Granlund, Niederreiter line, I guess. They're going to be going into the depth from Nashville. You know, they have been playing pretty well since Christmas. 3.4 expected goals for, 3.6 actual goals in their minutes together at 5-on-5. It kind of sucks for whatever reason. Cody Glass keeps getting benched at the end of every game, even though he's probably one of their 5 best forwards at this point. But, you know, if a 2-man of like Glass and Niederreiter, I think is just fine as like a 2-man, you know, depth duo stack against what's pretty bad depth from the Sabres. Like, there is a 3.5 total here for Nashville, and you know, the projections are pretty spread out across their top 9. So don't mind a 2-man of like Glass and Niederreiter or something like that. On the Buffalo side, I think we have to keep an eye on Alex Tuch. He wasn't at practice yesterday. I do think they expect him to play, but just watch out for that. As long as he's there, yeah, I do like the Buffalo top line here today. It's a good, not great power play spot. I'm not worried about any 5-on-5 matchups, even if Forsberg and Duchesne are together. They're coming in with almost no ownership, like 1 to 2% ownership, which I think will probably be in that Boston range. It's giving them the best leverage on the entire slate. I do think if you want to pay up for a line tonight and you don't want to pay 24K for Boston or 21,000 for Colorado or whatever, I think the Buffalo top line is the spot to go, considering their ownership and their upside.
Yep, agreed.
Oh, and Jack Quinn should be back in. Him and Paterka should be back with Cousins, so that's nice.
Yeah.
But I don't expect they're going to play that much. Maybe 12, 13 minutes.
Yeah, agreed there. We can get you a 5-day free trial for Stokastic NHL, and he gives you everything that we have to offer: projections, ownership, top stacks, rankings, Discord, everything you need to have success at NHL DFS. We are a bit pressed for time today, so we will bring the lineup building segment back early next week. We have 3 games left, under 8 minutes to go. If we build a lineup, we won't get to the last 3 games. But just make sure you click the link in the description. Sign up for your 5-day free trial. It'll get you through to, I believe, Thursday next week, and you'll have a couple big slates there. So get in the Discord, say hello. We'll go from there. Arizona Coyotes with a 2.3 total heading into Minnesota. The Wild have a 3.8 total. This is arguably the best power play spot on the night. So I do really like Kirill Kaprizov and Zuccarello here. A lot of people agree based on the projected ownership. If you want to leave off Steele, add in the Joel Eriksson Ek or a Matt Boldy, I think that's fine. With the Wild being home and Joel Eriksson Ek going out against top comp, I am out on the Coyotes.
Yeah, I didn't even research Coyotes numbers. I don't bother with teams going into Minnesota, particularly not top lines. On the Minnesota side, I think it is going to the top line just because you do get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. This is a tremendous power play spot. There is going to be a lot of ownership here because they are reasonably priced against Arizona. Like Arizona, 3.8 times shorthanded per game leads the league. Shots against per minute on the PK going back to December 1st, second worst next to Buffalo. Goals against, actually the worst. So just an unbelievable power play spot for Minnesota. So if you want to take out Steele and put in like Eriksson Ek, or want to go triple winger with Zuccarello, Boldy, Kaprizov, I think those are all stacks that are definitely in play here for Minnesota. The Arizona power play, I don't think there's anything that I'm really running out to play there. The Minnesota penalty kill is not super elite or anything, but they just don't take like a ton of penalties. They are above average in that regard. But Chychrun and Gostisbehere, they just don't seem to be meshing well on that top power play with Keller and Schmaltz. So I'm out on Arizona. Like I said, I think there are multiple ways to stack Minnesota, but I think you want to get the power play guys in this game. And it's not just Kaprizov and Zuccarello. Like I said, you can add in an Eriksson Ek, add in a Matthew Boldy, do something like that. It's all about the power play here.
Yeah. And that's a way to get different with that ownership too. If you leave off Steele, add in another guy. So you're going to be on some unique combos there. Let's move on to the next one. Wow. Is that a real goal? I haven't seen that name. I haven't heard in a long time. Edmonton Oilers with a 3.1 total heading into Vegas. The Golden Knights have a 3.5 total. Calvin Pickard, Logan Thompson probable. Oilers played last night, absolutely steamrolled the Sharks. Now, Kyler Yamamoto didn't play, and I know they ran lines and warm-ups of Holloway, McDavid, and Klim Kostin, but like in the first period, they were running McDavid, Draisaitl, Klim Kostin, second line of Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, Matthias Janmark. And then you saw a bunch of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman shifts. So I normally don't like stacking teams going into Vegas, especially if they're back-to-back on the road. But like low-owned Oilers here keeps me up at night. A lot of things keep me up at night, but that's one of them. I think going back to the power play guys here, or even one-offing McDavid, is perfectly acceptable here. If Calvin Pickard is indeed in net, like the Oilers are already a festival on defense, we'll have to wait and see if your boy Paul Cotter's still on that second line or if Riley Smith moves back up. But I do like Eichel. I think you can go that top line like Amadio, Stone, Stevenson, leave off Amadio, add in Eichel for a power play stack, and go about your day.
Well, Mark Stone's not in. He Yeah, he got hurt in their last game. He's out week to week. I think they said it might. People are speculating his back injury flared up, so it could be really bad for Vegas here.
We know about some back injuries.
Yeah, Stevenson played with Jack Eichel and Jonathan Marchessault in that game. That seems like a line that I might want to gravitate towards because even if it's Jack Campbell back in net, it's like Jack Campbell on a back-to-back. Is that better than Calvin Pickard or worse? Like it might actually be worse.
That is a scathing Yelp review right there.
Yeah, the problem is it's a fairly expensive line. Marchessault was 6,100 with Eichel at 75 and Stevenson at 51. So, you're looking at nearly a 19K line, double center. It'll be a unique combination, and it's a 3.5 total, and it's a pretty good power play spot, even if you don't have Mark Stone, because Edmonton does take a ton of penalties, 3-point time shorthanded per game, very bad penalty kill. I do have some interest in that Vegas side, but Mark Stone's like a pretty big engine at 5-on-5. He's 11th in the league in scoring chance contributions at 5-on-5 this season, like amongst the truly elite. So, I do think, like, if you're worried about how they're going to generate a 5-on-5, I do think it's fine to kind of avoid Vegas here, but it's still in a really, really good power play spot for them. In that top line is if it's Marchessault, Eichel, and Stevenson, it's going to be perfectly correlated on the power play. So we'll have to see what Vegas does as their lines, but if it's Eichel, Stevenson, and Marchessault, I do have quite a bit of interest in that going up against the Oilers on a back-to-back. I mean, Draisaitl, Hyman, McDavid, play them or don't. It's up to you. Like there's not going to be a ton of ownership on them here tonight. They're probably going to play together at 5-on-5 quite a bit and on the power play, obviously. Play them if you want, but it's the Vegas side. I think I'd rather play here.
Yeah. Didn't know about Stone. I should have noticed that there is an X and X next to his projection. That's on me, but yeah. We'll have to wait and see Vegas lines here. New Jersey Devils with a 3.2 total heading into Los Angeles. The Kings have a 3.3. Mackenzie Blackwood, Phoenix Copley, probable. Devils also played last night. Not much ownership on this game. It is a late hammer game here. If Blackwood's in net, I have, which he probably will be, I have some interest in that Velarde-Fiala combo here. You want to go to the top line, I think that's fine. You want to go to, Iafala Dinalt. We'll have to wait and see on Victor Arvidsson. He was out with an illness. It wasn't an injury. So if he is back, have some interest in that second line. But I think Velarde-Fiala, where I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's funny to see them as the Kings' third line, but we have them with a higher top two stack probability than the Kings' top line. Probably going to come in a little bit higher owned, but I agree with you. It is Fiala, Velarde, and Lizotte I like here. The Kings' top line has been playing well, though. 2.7 expected goals for, 2.3 against with Quentin Byfield there. Not generating a ton, but, Adrian Kempe, 15 shots in his last 5 games. I think he had 8 in one game or 7 in one game or something like that. So he's certainly starting to shoot a little bit more. But you want to match up against the New Jersey bottom 6. And it is Velarde and Fiala that is going to see a fair bit of bottom 6 matchups. So I agree with you. Fiala, Velarde, Lizotte, I think they make a nice filler stack to go with the more expensive ones here. You get 2 out of 3 guys on the top power play unit. Not that it's a great power play spot, but I think that's where I would go. I agree with you. Fiala, Velarde, Lizotte. On the Devils side, if anything, is going to the Hischier line the Hughes line, because I think Hischier and Bratt see a fair bit of the shutdown line from the Kings, whereas Hughes will see Kopitar, which is actually the easier matchup. So, not a lot of ownership on that Hughes line, 1.5%, coming in under 16K. So Hughes and Tatar, I think, make a reasonable 2-man here tonight, especially if you're playing a bunch of lineups, but it is Kings 3 I like best.
Yep. Coming up after us, NBA Strategy Show at 10 a.m. with Terry and Adam. And then I will be back at 1 p.m. with Greg for MMA Live Before Lock. So check in with that. We are pressed for time here. We're going to go straight to a hat trick pick. Who you liking as your hat trick pick?
I'm going with old Matty Boldy from the Minnesota Wild.
I'm going to go defenseman just to spice things up. Going Tomas Chabot.
Okay. That's okay. That's pretty out there.
Cliffy's so upset with that, he's going to go have some more French toast. So for maybe. So for Cliffy, I'm your host, Josh Harris. We will see you either on Monday or Tuesday. I didn't look at the schedule. Good luck, everybody. If you want some defensemen and goalies, hop in the Discord. Ask us. We'll be around today. Good luck, everybody.
Eric Comrie, 6,500. Good luck.